mind sharing with us what's happening? To Leah or Kim, either of you can address that. Okay. As Cookie, let me just talk with you a little bit about what has been going on for the past 2 weeks. As you know, last week, Monday, events happened so quickly, and the protests started almost immediately here in Minneapolis and St. Paul. One of the things that has been a really main focus of ours is, how quickly events are moving, how quickly the activism is taking place. Um, so we have uh, independent person who was really um, the who was videotaping, and this independent person had then done some research to really find out what was going on. There's news reports, but there's it's different than what's on the ground. So first of all, with the investigation, there's lots of positive changes in the works for us. And so we are taking a look at the charges that have been levied initially were third-degree murder. Those charges, after further investigation, have been changed. Additionally, the other police officers that were involved are now charged with being bystanders. That's a result of public pressure. And so just standing by was not something that they were going to get away with. That was last week. So this week, the Minneapolis Police Department made some changes on what it was specifically they were going to do. And they realized that there were several errors that happened in the previous week. So the most recent update is that the the police themselves were not permitted to use that particular hold. So the knee in his neck was inappropriate. Um, the police officers that were standing by, they didn't follow protocol and they should have intervened. That should not have been ignored. Last week, George Floyd, he was murdered. And at first, people were saying it was third-degree murder. And even if that were the case, the police officers cannot merely just stand by and watch. They were to intervene. Police officers do have discretion, and when they can intervene in another police officer's actions. And so they neglected to do that. And that's an important new development this week, that they are being held accountable. Another change from last week is the protests themselves. So, Kim, would you like to add to that?
Hi, yes, this is Kim speaking now. We have now made sure that our Black deaf community are safe. We are asking to check in at homes and make sure there are no bottles that are full with gas underneath the garages and things like that. We want to make sure that your cars are not without license plates and things like that. So we call immediately to take pictures for your make sure you take pictures for your insurances and things like that. And then your every day, make sure you check in with your locals to make sure if they need help with transportation, if they need help with food, things like that, if they have resources ready for themselves. And to be in touch with deaf and hard of hearing services to make sure, is there anything that we're overlooking, some things that we're unaware of, are there any new advancements, anything like that. We like to give information like that and share with our members. we set up conversations in different chat times to open up the avenues so that we can provide advocacy and safety. And those who have mental health issues, how those things are approached and addressed, we have already made a recent communication related to that. So those are some things that it's a trying time for all of us, and we all are all overwhelmed and we're all afraid, and we're trying to advocate for our Black deaf, walking while deaf, walking while Black deaf, walking while Black. We try to make sure everyone is comfortable and supported. It's an important thing that we need to do right now. And for our Black deaf family, we want to make sure that we are taking care of that. It is a struggle. Wow, this is really heavy. And it's positive that we are all here together and in solidarity. I did want to check in and see, who do we call for support? Do we call in for the police, or who do we call? We call for the Association of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and looking for resources that way. And we have worked through the chat feature and to provide support. And now we have our own video phone number as well. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Next question. This can be for anyone to respond to. Based on this previous month and all these things that are happening, and how has it impacted you individually so far? I can answer that, Sis Cheryl. For me, emotionally, I've been overwhelmed. It's hard to deal with what I'm reading day to day. And that's not the only thing. Emotionally, I have cried a lot this past month because of several instances. But I do think that today, the day-to-day things that happens with the dogs and with shootings and with George Floyd, I think that it was the straw that broke the camel's back, really. I just could not function. I was just so shocked and paralyzed and emotionally distraught, just crying and crying. And that was another event. I don't know if anyone else are aware of that, but there was another one. Just an 11-year-old Black girl was taken, accosted, and beaten by a white woman. And she accused the young girl of stealing her mail. And the white woman just took the mail, opened it, and realized she was wrong. But just that instant just was really heavy. I have children who are 11 years old, and just I can see their faces, and I just broke down. So it was just very emotionally, mentally, and just exhausting. I keep thinking every day it's going to get better, it's going to get better, but then something else happens, something else happens. I think I'm going to recover, but it just happens again and again. And I'm just fed up. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else like to share your experiences? I will speak for myself. This is Kim. I just can't sleep. Each time I see another message, another post about George Floyd, I fall asleep and then I see him take his last breath. His nose was bleeding at that time. And I just keep that memory. I just keep going.
Yeah, that kind of thing happens, Nunu said.
And it's just hard during the week to try to make sure that members are okay and safe, and make sure my hearing friends are okay and just my neighbors are okay. It's just too much. It's just a lot to see people getting hurt through this process. It's unfortunate. Seeing these sad faces, it just breaks my heart. It just maintaining stability, trying to do that with the members. And I often forget about myself, and it's overwhelming. And I need to deal with the home front because my husband has mental health issues as well. So adjusting to find my balance at the same time, it is hard. It's really hard.
So, did you want to add anything else? Hi. Oh, Nunu, you started to say something. Did you want Nunu? Can you see me? Hi, Nunu. Are you able to see me? I don't think she can. Nunu says yes. So, with George Floyd, at the time that he was lying down, yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here. Okay. Oh, sure. Okay. Could you go ahead? So Nunu is asking, can everybody see me okay? I can see you. Okay. So Isidore, yeah, everybody says, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. So Nunu says, right. So at that time of the police, um, Chavin, placing his knee on George Floyd's neck and him saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe for nearly 9 minutes. That was so impactful. Nearly 9 minutes is a very long time. Um, and I thought, oh my gosh, that should be enough. Like, stop. But it just kept going. And I watched as his eyes began to close and he called for his mom. Like, that's the last call, when someone calls for their mom. I was so grieved. I just thought, can you just pull him up? Can you just pull him up? And so this is also why the world is infuriated to actually watch this happen. I am so heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. Isadore, thank you. Cookie, did you want to add anything? Yes, please. So I just wanted to add, I work also as a school counselor at the deaf school, and several of our students right now, they are far away from home, and many of those students are students who have seen those type of traumatic things happen. They see the protests. Some students live close to Chavin, so they're seeing their neighborhood and they're seeing exactly what's going on. So to talk with them about that, it's tough. It's really been tough on my energy, students, and facilitating them and helping them to process their emotions. It's been very emotional to hear their stories, to hear their feelings. They're saying, I'm Black, I'm a deaf person. Now, what do I do? To hear those questions, like, how do I survive? To help them process that and to move through it. Um, some of the students had commented that they felt helpless because that's their home and they're seeing the protest and they don't know what to do. So their feelings are very raw. It is very heavy to have these conversations. Um, the students who live in that neighborhood, and some students um, don't have the right information. They can only go by what they see on the television screen. Maybe some students have access to social media, but they you can't get everything from corporate media. So, it doesn't always show what is accurate. So, based on what they see, then we need to facilitate to get them to what the truth is. And so, to be sure they have the right information so that they are not coming away with complete misunderstanding, because later they can make some assumptions about things. So, you know, it's important that, I've had to provide them with context. I've had to think about how to present the information. Sometimes I've had to make decisions about whether to be involved with them in these conversations. It's been very, very, very challenging 2 weeks. So, not only last week, but this week too, in mediating with the students. I've had to advocate for their needs, to listen to them, to take in what they're saying. We need to create a plan for them. I don't know if we need to design some type of one on one time or mentoring. It is very challenging. It's very challenging. Isidore, Talia is saying, can you see me? Okay. Can everybody see me? Talia? I echo all of the statements that have been said so far. I'm grieved. There really is no way to express what I'm feeling. There's no language for it. This has been going on for generations, and it's intergenerational. It keeps going on and on and on. Um, I wish people paid attention before, but it doesn't matter. These incidents keep happening. We tell our story, but nothing changes. Now, all of a sudden, people are awake and they're like ready to pay attention. And all of my friends are coming out to ask me questions. And I'm like, no, where were you all those many generations ago? I feel I need to draw a line. You know, it's just so many layers of trauma. It's complex trauma, community trauma. Lots of white people have, tried to take advantage of this moment. And honestly, I am like not feeling it. I know this is just a very vulnerable moment for me, but Isidore is saying, I thank you. And I agree. Yes. In our community, we need to stand together and speak and say enough is enough. Now, would you mind um, sharing your own personal experience with racism and or the police? I don't know if any of you have had any experiences that you'd like to share. Really, really, come on, seriously, like where do we start? I mean, honestly, Isadora said, okay, well, who wants to go first with that question? Cheryl is saying, I'll share an experience with you. Just recently. It's been a complex, kind of intersectional situation where it's being Black and being deaf. On the video phone, oftentimes there's lots of misunderstandings that happen. So on VRS with interpreters in particular. So when using VRS interpreters, it's just, things get so confused and mixed up. I remember at court, the judge had said, he didn't believe my husband's story. Of course, it was a white judge. And so the judge says, I don't believe you because you can't speak. You're not deaf. And I'm like, what? Okay, so the court made a decision based on my husband's ability to speak. However, I'm not a person who zips my lips very easily, I don't keep quiet. So in that particular situation, it involved a group of young people. And the police were involved. White police officer came to a deaf person's home. Their home was vandalized and destroyed, and the police didn't bring an interpreter. So I had told the deaf folks in the neighborhood, I said, don't say anything, don't speak up until they provide an interpreter for communicating with you. And the police gotten angry with me and cited me. I got a citation for that. And the situation like that, I don't know what and how he can do that. I'm like, you know, being a deaf person, being Black, I can't separate that out. And the police, the police person was white and just didn't understand. So the police officer was mad with me, and it felt as though it was retaliation, to be quite honest with you. And that retaliation happens often, that you get cited, and as a way of retaliating against me, because as a Black deaf person, I had the audacity to speak up. Wow. Wow. Anybody else want to share? Cookie?
Yes, thank you. This is Cookie speaking. I would like to add, okay, I did mention about the 2 weeks being very challenging and hard emotionally, and just emotional investment that's all in this, and my students and my own two children as well. So I decided last weekend to leave 2 hours north of the Twin Cities. And because I felt like I just needed self-care. I needed to focus on my students that I work with. And so I just left 2 hours north. So I did that to try to just find some release and healing for myself, to allow myself to process. When we arrived, I didn't feel safe. I was the only one, the only Black deaf woman, and I didn't feel safe. There was another friend who was in the same town. So I went to that friend and said, can I be with you, because I just don't feel safe. Even if I am just on a trail or walking around just by myself, I just did it hiking myself. I didn't feel safe. So I was able to go with my friend, which is a white deaf person. In the evening, I met with another person and was able to have dinner and went to go pick up the food at the restaurant. It was a small, nice little restaurant there. And they had a small parking lot. The cars were parked in which way. And it was really near to the street. And you have to really, look around and be observant and make sure that you're where you're parking in the parking lot. So I made my way and parked. And in front of me, there was a white truck, a huge white truck there. So I backed in and I just felt a jolt. I'm like, what is this? So the person in the truck, I don't know how, I just don't know how, I don't even have understanding about what happened, but decided to back in and broke my tail light. And I freaked out, because that, not only was I alone, but that alone for me was Black deaf cure woman. That was like a death sentence for me. A broken tail light. So there was no way for that person to overlook. It seems really impossible. You can see in the rearview mirror. You can look back. You can see. So it was impossible for that person not to see me. And I felt very targeted in that moment. And I was really scared, because I'm 2 hours away from home. There's no help around. I don't know where to get my car fixed. It was late at night. So this broken tail light that in itself is just an easy way for me to get pulled over. So it was a really scary, fearful experience to be targeted. And then to drive home is just, I'm happy that I arrived home. And I am happy that my friend was there to support me because I could have, not have been here in that experience now. Thank you for sharing, as Doris saying. Anyone else want to add? Nunu did want to add. Nunu, do you want to, let's see if she can see us. Would you like to add, Nunu, your experience? Can you see us? Yes, I do. I do like to say something. Yes. Yes, I do like to say something. It just seemed like my screen, there's a slight delay between the phone and, okay, I'll go ahead here. Yes. So at this time when I was living in Minnesota, the can everyone see me? Yes. Okay. So at this time I was living in Minnesota in St. Paul. At that time, I would say it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. I was I didn't feel like cooking. I wanted to go out and get some takeout. So I'm in the car driving. There was no one around on the roads. And then I did see siren lights. So I'm like, okay, this is a cop. So I pulled over, and then he came to my car and started talking, and I said, I can't hear you. And then he motioned to me, have you been drinking? And I said, no. And he says, I smell, put his finger to his nose, I smell that you've been drinking, driver's license. And I was like, okay. I give it to him. He gives it back to me and says, you've been drinking. And he keeps pointing to his nose that he's he smells. And then it came to realize that maybe it was the chemicals from my hair that he was smelling, and that is not alcohol, that was chemicals, because I had a perm at that time. So I lifted my hat, and the police said, oh, okay, didn't realize it's your hair. And so he thought I was drinking at that time. So the police left and just took off. There was no one on the road. I didn't speed. I was following the law. I wasn't sure why I was getting pulled over or anything because it smelled alcohol with the chemicals from my hair. It was not alcohol. So that the cop obviously was white. That's it. I do have a question for TL. I know that you've been working for a long time with Black deaf and Black deaf disabled, and working in the incarceration system, the prison system. And I know about the not sharing all of the content and crucial information. But I know you have experiences with police brutality. How can we support your work through HERD? And really, what can we do as a community to make your organization, the work that you've been doing, recognized? Because we can imagine today, even today and tomorrow, the Black deaf being accosted by the police. I'm sure that a lot of people contact you first in your organization. How can we continue to support? So I really appreciate I knew your message, and I do want to back up and say today the government, um, getting all putting people in prison, and there's no real tracking about who's deaf, and but I will say that in the prison system, the most people who are marginalized there are disabled, LGBTQ, Black, Brown, Indigenous, women, high percentage. The list goes on, several different identities. There is an understanding with our Black, deaf, disabled. They don't have access to resources. And so they're able to be in the prison system without those. And the police system here continue to oppress our marginalized community, our Black, deaf, disabled. Yes, obviously. We support the Black, deaf, disabled community. Black, Latino, Indigenous, white, poor, drug users, sex workers, the list goes on. I do feel that the most important thing for the Black community to do is to start learning more about the importance of understanding. Abolish the system and not make small changes, but that because that hurts more.
I won't go on and on about that, but the basic content of it is it's important that there's, there's a sign up sheet and petition at our website. And so it would be important that we would call for changes and for reform. So we need to envision a future that has no police officers, that we don't have the prison industrial complex, that people can thrive, that Black lives really do matter. That is our goal as a community, as Black, deaf people. You need to promote the idea of people actually understanding fully what is going on. Mass incarceration is a real thing. It isn't good. We don't have many leaders. We don't have many people who have that perspective, who are talking about this issue in depth in the community. We just kind of have a superficial idea of what it is. And NBDA may want to partner with us to be at the table when these conversations are happening, so that the Black, deaf community, Indigenous people, and Spanish-speaking people, we really need to work on that, that we would be advocates, that your voices are heard in all changes. Isidore, yes. I agree that there's a breakdown of the system, and lots of people are talking about reform. I've noticed that President Obama had mentioned that the foundation of the system, primarily, it needs to change. That we need to have leadership to dismantle the system. Also, we need to envision what that looks like. How do we replace a security system if we abolish the police? Right. So let me elaborate a little bit on that. So dismantling the system, honestly, you have to look at the millions of dollars that is invested into the prison industrial complex, into the legal system, into policing. And so, compared to other countries, the United States, and we supply a huge investment into our prisons. We make up the largest population of prisoners in America, across the world. We lead the country. I mean, we lead the world in that. So there's a lot of profit to be made in private prison systems. And so in our community, our behaviors are labeled in a negative way and criminalized, and that helps to feed it into the system. And we need to stop that. So we need to have more in-depth conversation. We need to chew on the information. And yes, of course, it's step by step, but one of the ways to think about that is to reduce violence is, in our own community, we need to reduce harm. We need to reduce violence. And understandably, the legal system, it's disproportionate. It really doesn't matter whether or not you have, a few minor changes, because the disproportionality is so extreme at this point. And so these tiny little reforms really don't really solve the problem. So remember that from slavery, the slave system has been converted into what we currently have as the prison system. So, it's a dirty system. It cannot be fixed because both our prison system and our policing system is grounded in slavery. And so what we are experiencing today is a direct result and continuance of what had happened way in the past. And so it makes it very easy for the system to round us up and place us into prisons. It makes it very easy to criminalize our behavior because that's what it's rooted in. And so the police system was started as slave catchers, right? So slaves ran away, the individuals were deployed in order to bring them back, and that's the genesis of the American police system. And so that same culture has continued through till today. That's the system that is inherent within the system. So that's why I call for abolishing. Cheryl says, I want to add to what TL said is there are millions of dollars that are invested into the prison system. Every state, almost a large percentage of their budget goes into the incarceration system. It's not equal to what is invested in healthcare. And so a lot of monies are being poured into that system, and in particular on the backs of black men. So, for example, minor parole violations, if they show up late a few minutes, then all of a sudden they're back in jail. If you don't report, there's this whole other supporting set of procedures and policies that ensure that our black men end up permanently in jail. And so, those are the kinds of things that people uh, continuously try to reform, but we need to look there too. Isadora says, yes, I understand that. Wow, it's challenging. We've got a really long way to go. And everyone has to stand up and be involved. NBDA has about 30 chapters, and each of those chapters need to be active in having these ongoing discussions to uh, as not merely as not on, and we need to address our allies as well to have them partner with us in order to change the system. So, another question that I have, which is pretty heavy. I'm sure all that has happened, and within your family, I'm sure there's been some family dynamics that have changed. What do the conversations look like now at home with your family members, with your children, in light of what's happening today? Anybody? Any comments? Um, or maybe you have some important tips that you want people to think about regarding changing the system. So, based on what happened last week, and then all of a sudden, it started as one individual person, and now it's changed to, several people. Now we're talking about like one system being changed. Now the conversation is talking about racism and systemic racism. So a lot of changes has happened in a quick manner with regards to the conversation. So, how is it panning out in your home? This is Cookie. I'd like to mention I have two biracial children, and they're girls, and they live between two different households. So they're at their dad's for 1 week, and that's a white household. Then they live with me for another week, which is a black household. So with all that's going on at dad's house, I text him or sent him a message immediately and said, be sure you share information with them, that you talk with them. We do co-parent, and we need to have ensure that they're exposed to both of our perspectives, because our perspectives are different. Mine, I sign with my kids, and telling the story and having that conversation with them in sign language is interesting. So my kids came to me and they said that they saw military personnel nearby. They saw protesters, so they had a lot of questions. And during that conversation, I cook with my kids. One is 10, the other one is 8. One is hard of hearing, my youngest one is deaf. And so I had to go through and explain in depth with them. I held some things back. I told them what happened. I told them the why of the protest, and they took it in. I explained on their level, and they realized, I mean, they identify themselves as brown, and so they were starting to question their own safety. They started thinking about how other people perceive them. So it was interesting to have that conversation. I was clear with them, and I talked with my students as well. Um, and I just as I communicate with my students to explain things clearly, I talk with my kids too. It gets pretty deep. So far, they don't have too many questions yet. They are thinking. I can see them thinking, but they're still young. They're processing what's happening around them. But it's really, it's sobering to have this conversation with them, as I talk and have, they don't have access to information immediately. And so, again, they're taking in information and interpreting it as best they can. But I realize that I have to be clear, and I realize I have a lot of work to do still.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else would like to add? Cheryl. Yes, I have raised 2 Black boys. One is a biracial, and one is a Black daughter. I think about the Black children, and if they're comfortable with their Blackness. My son, who's biracial, sometimes is on the fence between the 2 worlds. I do think that for a while he struggled, partly because of the school system. We talk about Black history, but white deaf school explains by a white deaf teacher. You know how many times things are explained, but not in a positive way, but more of a negative way. So I do remember my son, he was about 7 at that time when he was talking about Black history, and he came to me and said, "I don't want to sit in the back of the bus," you know? And everything that he was talking about, I did, as a Black mom, I didn't plan this. I wasn't prepared, I felt, to deal with the issues that were brought to me by my biracial child. But I see, he sees both of them, part of him, Black and white. But for a long time, he resisted. I'm not Black. I'm not Black. I have a Black parent, and I deal with biracial children with the struggle for a while. But I do feel fortunate that my son, had other biracial children around. And even at the time, the president was biracial as well, so he could identify with the president, President Obama. But I do think that we need to start to, changing that when they're really young, because my Black son, who I would remember, and he was 3, and he came home from preschool. It wasn't thinking about racism or anything like that. I was thinking that it didn't impact him at that young age, but it did. At age 3, he was crying, saying, "Mom, this boy said that he can't play with me because my skin is Black." I was stunned. He was 3 at that time. So we have to have the dialogue, the discussion about racism, even with our younger children while they're, when they're really young. We can't wait till they're 10 or 12 and we think, oh, it's a perfect time to have this nice discussion. No, we really need to have this conversation in our Black homes, in our white homes. We need to start this when they're young. Wow, yes. This is deep. I really feel like this 1 hour is really not enough for this type of conversation. Really, we have more questions that are coming in. And before I wrap up, I will like to have two more questions. One, I know that we have been recognizing some people or start to talk about deaf topics through this time of protest in the world situations that are happening and Black Lives Matter. Why do you feel like this is the wrong time that they're posting about deaf matters also? Does anyone like to share your perspective about that? This is Cheryl. I'll speak again because this is a lot on my Facebook page. I think that it is distracting from it's a distraction from the real issues that are happening right now. American people, Black, deaf, yes. But right now it is just happening to Black people. Oh, Cheryl's talking right now, and then we'll be get Nunu after. So, and Cheryl saying this is happening to Black people. I'm not talking about deaf people. They're not getting killed every day. We're not talking about deaf people getting abused every day. But for us Black people, this is happening repeatedly. And we're going through this traumatic experience almost daily, seeing Black person killed, a Black person in jail, in prison system. So this is not the right time. That's the bottom line. But to talk about our intersectionality, we cannot separate us that we are Black or deaf and things like that. And we're focused on Black people right now. Nunu, did you want to add? Can she see us? Your turn, Nunu. Okay, great. I'm not sure if I should go ahead or not. This is Nunu. Okay, I'll start now. So, talking about deafness, I will go ahead and start now. Okay. So, the comments about deafness, I think is just what does deafness have to do with being Black? Really? I told my partner, why are white people saying, oh, this is the same as, being deaf and we're marginalized well and all this? Why just like Black people, the deafness is not, this doesn't have anything to do with Blackness. No, how can deafness have something to do with racism? How? We can't hear. That's all. That's what deafness is. I keep feeling like I have to explain this about deafness. This is not about deafness right now. This is about skin color right now. That's it. People want to say, no, you have to look at deaf people too and talk about that. And I'm saying, no, how do I get this in your head? You have to accept your places of privilege and change that. Deafness is not what the topic is right now. It is about color. And that's what I'm trying to figure out how I can get that in people's head right now.
So when we talk about the deaf community, we can talk about deaf people with disabilities, deaf blind individuals, and there's a whole myriad of groups within the deaf community. And so, when we talk about people who are murdered by police, that is one, you know, portion of that identity that might be removed if they're deaf and black. If they're indigenous, yes, they do have some kind common experiences. And white, some individuals, like white individuals, they do have a disability. That is one of the common threads between the groups. But black and brown skin is a totally different conversation when we're looking at systems of oppression, racism, race exclusion. This is not an issue of removing a person's identity, but we have to name it, that a person is deaf and all of these other things. And so when we see the death rates that are happening, when we see the murders that are happening, the white deaf community, for example, they just kind of amalgamate together and they focus in on their own one thing. But when we are, speaking about the murders of police, I mean, murdered by police, um, oh, I remember 3 years ago, there was a situation where a Black, deaf, disabled individual was abused and beat by the police. And, the deaf community, I don't know if they were completely outraged by that. But again, that it happens over and over and over again. And it was because primarily he was targeted because he was Black. And so the police are not after you because you're deaf. They are specifically looking at persons of color. And if a person of color happens to also be deaf, then there's where the intersectionality happens. So, has any deaf person been specifically targeted for being deaf and then being murdered by police? No, I haven't seen the case. And so that's the main important thing that we need to focus in on in our community and make that clear. Isadora says, thank you. That was clear. So um, I've noticed periodically that uh, s- things have been happening within the LGBTQ community. And how does that relate with where we are today? How does that relate with members of the Black community, TL? Sure. Again, Tony Castile, who was, I don't know, Tony, he was recently murdered by the police. He was transgender. And again, he was a person of color. But that internalized oppression readily happens. But to be doubly marginalized and removed from one's own community, there isn't much advocacy, there isn't much support. But again, marginalized individuals, excluded individuals, people who are part of a oppressed group, the system is designed for that to happen. So individuals who are trans or queer, they tend to hide. But whether that burden of one's race continues, that is an issue of oppression. And so we need to look at oppression across all sectors. I guess I can drop that in. Isadora says, you've given us a lot of food for thought. Anybody have some uh, last questions? And then we will open this up for the audience for any questions that they may have. Yes, Cheryl. So I will say for the past 2 to 3 weeks in the Black deaf community, we've had to significantly deal with racism within amongst white deaf people too. Many times people who say that they're allies, especially the ones who are on social media, they're like, oh, did you see that? Did you see that? Did you say that? And then that information gets passed around, and that's not helpful. You're multiplying the trauma by passing it around. The point is, as an ally, people need to do their part. And any racism, you need to stop the action instead of passing it around. You cannot be silent. So, white deaf people, enough already. You need to stop. So, as Black deaf people, we deal with racism because our bodies are the ones on the line. You're not part of our community. If you are feeling that you're part of community, well, and you've seen what has happened and you're not doing anything and you claim that it's all one community, then you cannot be silent. If you're not going to do anything, then just stop. I see people say things, oh, I see hidden racism. I see a lot. I mean, I've seen vlogs where people are talking as though they advocate for diversity. And if you advocate for diversity, that is racism. We have to call it what it is. That's all I have to say. Isadora, yes, we need to call it what it is. And we have to call for accountability and action. And so, what do we ask allies to do? What is the action that they need to take to be accountable? So, you say things need to change, as TL said. As TL said, that if there's any, there's systems that need to be dismantled, and so that's a call to action. Anybody else have any other calls to action? Okay, I guess people have homework to do then. They have to do their work. Allies have to educate themselves. They need to learn more. We can provide some resources maybe, but people have to do their work. I promise this is my last question, and then we'll go to the audience. This is a difficult time. People are grieving. People are exhausted. The protesting has been going on for a long time. Several days, several people are still dying. My question is, what do we need to do as a community to heal from this? Nunu, I saw your hand go up. Did you have a comment? Nunu, I don't know if she can see us. Let's just wait because I know there's a technical delay. She'll catch on in a second. Nunu, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Nunu. Yes, this is me. Okay, so how can there's a little bit delay, excuse me. It's a slight delay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Okay. So how can we heal? The best for people to do is to sit still and quiet and listen. Open up and just look within and do some searching. Patiently, don't hurry, don't rush, just really take your time and process this. And then white people are asking, what can they do? Maybe you could read or read a book or do some research. What should I do? Should I talk to Black people? Just keep your mind open and your heart open and patient and be accepting and process this. Slow down. It's just like a baby when they're just born. Do you feed them meat right away? No, you feed them, proper food. So take your time, be accepting, and when you understand and you get in that place of empathy, then you can process. We will be stronger. It's better than saying, but this and that, and but this and that. No, we have no time for that. Seriously, we have no time for that. You want to be inclusive of the Black community, then be accepting. Listen, be quiet, and self analyze to understand. That's it. It's not hard to do. It's not simple at all. You see me, I'm working and working and fighting and fighting. And some people are saying, no, I can't do this. This is really hard. I can't do that. And I'm saying, so many years that Black people were suffering and suffering, and you can't do it. You can't do that. Well, I think it's wrong. A place of privilege, and you think that you think it's easy to just move on. No, it's not. Isadora here, thank you. I think Cookie wanted to have a follow-up comment to this. Cookie here, yes. I do have a follow-up comment to New News, yes, about white people. I think, yes, it's right. They do need to listen. They do need to listen and to stand when they need to, when it's necessary. Also, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest comments people have been making, you need to unpack your biases. Unpack your biases and just self-analysis. And don't just accept, no, accept and also analysis and unpack your biases. Open up your mind. It will be much easier for you in this process. And also understand that we can't really 100% understand what Black people, what we are going through or experiencing, because you're not us. But to analyze, look within, and figure out your own biases as white people is very important, is very crucial. So that's my comment I'd like to add. Isadora here, thank you. Kim, did you want to add? Yes, this is Kim here. It's very important that we all need our space. It's very important. People ask, what can I do? How can I support? What can I offer? All these questions. You can't offer anything. Just you cannot just be a bystander and offer something. Just listen up, be quiet and listen. We are commenting. Do we have to repeat the same thing over and over? No, we don't. We should not have to. You should know, they should know what to do. We need our space, we need our boundaries. Let us breathe, let us recover. It will be a long time. This is every day is a struggle. It still is today. It was yesterday and it was hundreds of years ago, It takes time. It's very important. Take time for all of us, regardless. Isadora here. Thank you. Thank you. And now, before and TL wanted to, sorry to interrupt, just briefly, I wanted to say something. I think the most important thing is to stop blaming ourselves. Oftentimes, a person runs from the police as a natural response. It's that intergenerational trauma, or that passed down trauma, rather. Sorry, it's just, it's traumatic experience. We will pass out information to Black deaf community to support sometimes our humanity, what happens to us, these years, generations and generation of trauma, the same thing. And then the system continues to blame us, and that traumatic experience increases. Stop blaming. It's really important for us to heal. Thank you, Isadora saying thank you. This is Isadora. So speaking of recovering and healing, I think it's really important to announce before we take on the questions from the audience. Uh, I think it was very important to touch on that. So at 3 p.m. next Sunday, we will have a member-hosted Black Deaf Connection with Recovery for Healing with Gloria, with Claudia, Claudia. And two more counselors will be joining in with that. So that will happen next Sunday, and they will be hosting that space for us for healing and recovery. So I would caution everyone to join. Okay, let's take some questions from the audience. I have one or two for those of you who are in Minneapolis currently. People do want to join in and support your chapter to become a member. How can they do that? It seems like some of the people in your chapter is very active, and they want to be able to join in your chapter and in support. And we can have the president to answer that.
Sure. I'll do that. I'll take that one. So many people are interested in joining us. And in St. Paul, our chapter is growing. We have some challenges. We've had to face some challenges in the past. We had a major loss of membership in the past. And so we're in a new phase at this point to recruit in more members. We have several events on the horizon. So we have plans for growth, recruitment, and we are trying to get the younger generation involved as well. Right now, we're in our growing phase, and so just watch out for some events. We are planning a Juneteenth celebration where we can get together, which is next week. That's right. Yeah, we will be doing that virtually. We will be hosting an event. And maybe as a result of COVID, we've canceled our plans. So, understandably, in St. Paul and in the Minneapolis area, we will have to try and figure out another schedule, because we have to figure out how to keep everybody safe, how to continue social distancing. And so we have a new Facebook page as well. And so we've just created a brand new one. And anyone who is interested, you can contact us there quickly. And again, we are going through a growth phase. Just keep that in mind. Kim, did you want to add anything? This is Kim. So for now, we are dealing with like two bad apples. So we are trying to bring in members into our chapter. As Cookie said, we had some challenges in the past, and so we are now having to clean up and deal with some previous issues. There was a person who was attempting to file a complaint or a suit against us, but we are having to deal with that situation right now. So we're encouraging members to join us. And honestly, that situation, we had no idea that that was going to happen. And so we will see how the community will support us through this challenging time. Isadora, I would like to add to that as the NBDA president. And we need to have people from Minneapolis come in and join the membership, and you can look online at nbda.org, and you can see there's events that will be hosted. So the other comment was TL, you wanted to say something, and a question. So a person is asking, so How can other chapters be supportive of your organization, TL? So this is TL signing. We used to have chapters in a variety of areas, so we've decided to limit our chapter expansion. So right now we're looking at our organizational structure. We're looking at trying to set up the foundation. We had gone through some growing pains. We had some initial thoughts, and we've had to take a seat and think about how we are going to move forward. We have a chapter in Texas, New York, and Florida. And all of those chapters are we have those suspended at the moment, just because we need to think about what our national structure is going to look like. We need to come up with policies and practices. And now that the world has shifted enormously since 2011, we realize that we need to respond to how we're going to be organized in this climate. So more to come. Isidore is saying yes, great. So I was wondering, are we able to replace police with peacekeepers? you know so if you were talking about dismantling our police system, so the idea came through on establishing peacekeepers. TL says yes. Okay, so seriously, we can do that. It's important to have the right perspective. So, the white community, they don't have police coming into their community monitoring them all the time. So there's evidence they don't need to be hyper policed. So what's the difference? They don't have military in their neighborhoods, but we do. And so it's clear that people can do it. We need the investment. We also, and it needs to be a transformative process. It's going to take teams, it's going to take the indigenous people in those communities in order to create that new vision. So we have one more question for you all, and anybody can respond. So let me read it here. How can white people help us with Black Lives Matter, with the Black Lives Matter movement? That's open to anybody. How can white people help us with the Black Lives Matter movement? Go ahead, Cheryl. As I said, first, you need to get rid of your biases first. You can't help us do anything until you remove your bias. Second, speak out when you see racism, when you see discrimination happening, when you see police abuse, brutality happening. You need to speak out and do something. So one of the reasons that we have such a knowledge boom is because George Floyd, a 17-year-old girl, imagine, she was young, with her cell phone. She was nervous and she stood there and she filmed what was happening. She filmed what she saw. She had concern. Who knows? She could have been brutalized as well. If a 17-year-old can take action to show the world, and here we are as the result of a 17-year-old, to show police brutality, to show what it looks like, then many of you can do something. Too many people are silent. You need to say, stop the violence against Black people. And so right now, there's a whole lot that you can do, but too many people are silent. And you blame Black people for their own harm. No, we don't harm ourselves. There are millions of Black people who are unnamed and dying, but white people are afraid and then they decide to do nothing. And the point is, you need to do something. And one thing you can do is speak up. Kim says, don't be a bystander. When you see racism happening, say something. Make some noise. You need to do something. Black lives do matter. It's important. Please I think about you need to think, what if it was your brother, your cousin, your uncle? Watching is not enough. You need to think about that. You need to stop. And you need to listen up, white people. Pay attention. The story is there. It's happening in front of you. Do not twist our history. Don't do it. Don't take our stories and make it your own. You can't live our lives for us. We live it. We live it. And I'm angry. I still can't sleep. So you all need to stop it. I need to breathe now. Okay, hang on. I need to calm down. Let me just take a breath. I'm okay. I'm all right. TL is saying, yes, Black bodies are on the line. Black people don't have an option. And so we have been on the front lines historically. So if you don't speak up for you, it's okay. Nothing will happen. But the time is now. So it's time. It's time for you to speak up and take a stand. When you see a Black person being abused, instead of what is the point? Not merely videoing it, but at the same time, you need to stand up. Because the abuse is going to happen again and again and again and again. There were white people there. I blame them too. The police who were there, that kind of behavior has started 300 years ago. This is old behavior. And so white people have been silent. And it is time for you to speak up. And so, that the time is now. Stop asking us questions. Stop asking how you can help. You need to do your work. And we are tired. We're exhausted. Enough already. That's all I have to say. Don't depend on us. Isadora is saying, I'd like to add something to share with you. Uh, so, NBDA, I'm sorry. Oh, there's lots of donation. Oh, people can donate to us. And so right now, once this meeting is done, will it happen again? I don't know. Make some donations to the organization. If you have the power, if you have privilege, and you're in the system, remember, the system was set up by white people for white people against Black people. So you need to take action to dismantle it. You have the money, you have the investment, you have the access. Whether it's a organization, whether it's a school for the deaf, it doesn't matter. You need to stop the discrimination. Support organizations of color, support Black businesses, be motivated to change the system. At the same time, always remember that you need to unpack your stuff. We need we need to feel as safe as you do. We need to feel safe around you.
This is Kim. One more thing I'd like to add. It's okay for white people to get uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say this, but get uncomfortable. Don't be like, oh, it's safe for me to go to a Black deaf person. No, you will see the rawness, our hearts, our face, our expressions, how we are representing ourselves. Take that in mind, and remember that we have already told you. We are not going to repeat and repeat and repeat this. We are done. That's it. Thank you. And this is Isadora. And I'm so sorry that this discussion needs to keep going, but we have passed the time that we need to wrap up now. But I do want to let you know that we will continue this dialogue, and please stay tuned for the next Tuesday. We will host this again, and potentially ongoing. And then we'll have a different panelist, and we'll be looking up at our Facebook page, NBDA Facebook page, and posting soon some more information. But we want to say thank you again for you all to come in, your volunteering, your donations, and participation and standing with us, dismantling this system. Please stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night. Bye.